To help us understand the latest developments and what they can mean for regional stability, we're joined by Sierra Knoch, professor at Valley College and US foreign policy analyst, joining us from California. Sierra, thank you so much. Trump says that the talks with Iran are imminent, but Tehran insists there are no direct negotiations. How should we read these conflicting messages?
Well, this is pretty much how things have been going with Iran with regard to dealing with President Trump and dealing with the U.S. They consistently deny that negotiations are happening. Of course, we do know from past experience that the negotiations do happen. Every time that Iran has denied it, then later we have actually heard from President Trump's team, people like Steve Witkoff, who said, I was there, I was meeting with Iranian officials, this is what we were discussing. But, unfortunately, whether Iran admits it or not, the negotiations, it's just a signal that they don't take the negotiations seriously. And this is just another signal that that's what they're doing. They're not taking them seriously. They're not admitting that they're happening, and they're being very deceptive.
Well, Iran says it's only talking with Oman about the Strait of Hormuz. Could this become a stepping stone towards broader US-Iran diplomacy, or is it strictly about maritime security?
Well, I think that the Strait of Hormuz is absolutely part of the larger conversation. I think that, maritime security it's not really about maritime security. What it's really about is Iran is threatening the global economy, and they view the Strait of Hormuz as leverage in their larger conflict with the United States. And to be frank, that is not a good position for them to take because, first of all, the Strait of Hormuz and the global oil shipping that comes through that area, they're actually just accelerating its decline. There's already pipeline deals that are coming across the rest of the Middle East, and there's a lot of interest from these Gulf countries in, just bypassing the Strait of Hormuz entirely. And the United States, for our part, we don't really use the Strait of Hormuz that much. So, you're certainly not going to see any business from the United States going through that region. And so the more that Iran pushes this point that they want to have control over this, it's actually just weakening their country and weakening their position on the global stage.
Well, Sierra, what are the biggest obstacles preventing Washington and Tehran from negotiating and returning to the table, despite the growing international calls for de-escalation?
Well, of course, diplomacy and peace is the ultimate goal. But I think that we have to remember what peace really means. Iran has been, basically a regional bully for so long that people, I think, have forgotten what peace really means. Saudi Arabia, for example, is getting ready to launch a major offensive against the Iran-backed Houthis. And so, and then Saudi Arabia comes to President Trump and says, well, we don't want to do any more escalations because we want peace. Is that really peace? Is fighting the Houthis that are backed by Iran really peace? And that goes for all these proxies that Iran sends across the region to destabilize the region. So I think we have to have a conversation about what does peace really mean? And do we want peace or do we want the status quo? Because the status quo is the United States has carriers all over the Persian Gulf. These proxies are still threatening the region. They're still threatening the global economy. All of these major issues, and that these countries, these Gulf countries, and the rest of the Middle Eastern region have said that they don't want this. They're very unhappy with Iran's behavior. So if they really want to change the status quo, I think it's an unpleasant process, but the goal at the end is actually to get true peace.
And if diplomacy fails, what are the most likely next steps from both the United States and Iran, and how concerned should the region be about another round of escalation?
Well, I think there's always a possibility for another round of escalation. Obviously, President Trump favors diplomacy. We're seeing that again right now. And he favors diplomacy, but maybe maybe there needs to be a conversation about how much diplomacy is really effective right now. But in terms of, what could happen if diplomacy fails, I think, well, we've heard Iran threaten preemptive strikes. They have targeted American bases across the region, as well as infrastructure of these Gulf countries. And the United States, of course, has plans, has war plans, and potentially along with Israel as well for strikes on Iran. And President Trump, has said that these would be massive strikes. So I think that is very much still on the table, and certainly, the targeting of civilian infrastructure by Iran is a very major issue in this conflict, and it needs to stop. But it's also something that I think the regional countries need to prepare for.